All right, coming up next, a company that I am excited about, a company that have seen a ton of investor interest over the last year, and a company that, in my opinion, is definitely pushing the envelope in their industry. We have coming up next, MindMed. It's ticker NMMD, and we have the CEO here, Rob Barrows. Rob, how you doing?
Great to be here. Thanks so much.
No problem. I see your slides backstage. Now I see him on screen, and that means we are good to go. I am super excited to learn more about MindMed directly from the CEO. Let's have at it, sir.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and thanks everyone for being here. I'll give a quick rundown and then open it up to Q&A for the last few minutes here. Um, I think to start, I just point out that we all know that there's a viral pandemic at the moment, but there's also a mental health pandemic. And we need new medicines with novel approaches to meet the expanding demand and the serious demand that exists out in the world. The good news is that we have a psychedelic renaissance we've seen emerge over the last several years, and MindMed has been at the very cutting edge of this. It's advanced by a growing body of clinical trial evidence and data coming out of modern clinical trials, and an increasingly favorable regulatory environment to take these therapies forward into the clinic and beyond. Um, we're leading an entirely new wave of research in this area to understand the potential of psychedelics and to realize that potential to usher in a new paradigm to treat brain health disorders and mental health conditions, both here in the United States and around the world. So before I go further, I'm obligated to disclose or disclaim here that this presentation and what I just said contains forward-looking statements and comes with all of the qualifiers thereof. Um, what we are building at Mind Medicine is the leading innovators in the space of psychedelics and psychedelic drug development. We are going to build a powerhouse in neuroscience development that expands beyond just psychedelics, but starting with the psychedelics, given the unique opportunity it represents. We're led by a team of world-class drug developers who come out up and down the organization, come out of both small, mid-size, and large pharmaceutical organizations. And really, I think one of the things we're most proud of is the talent we've been able to attract, the individuals who are on a fast track inside of big pharma, who have stable, well defined career trajectories and are coming in, seeing the opportunity and joining our team and really helping us to catalyze this entirely new industry and drive a whole change in the treatment paradigm for mental health disorders. I spoke to the magnitude of the problem. We can look at the market size. We can look at how much mental health disorders cost the healthcare system in the United States and around the world. I think it's critically important to remember that behind all of those numbers are people who are suffering. And the treatments that we have, while some of them are beneficial, certainly, they're inadequate. We're not meeting a sufficient number of patients and helping them with their underlying disease. And that is really something that at MindMed we find a deep motivation for, is to usher in this new wave of treatments and these new therapies. I think it's important to note too, everyone has been touched in some way or another by mental health. 1 in 5 Americans are diagnosed with a mental health disorder. It's a staggering percent. Um, it is, regardless of geography, of social class, of political class, it really touches everyone's life here. And because of that, we see such a tremendous impact ushering this new therapy mode. In terms of how we approach this space, there have been many interests into the psychedelic world. Again, we are drug developers. We come out of the pharmaceutical industry, and we look at this incredibly attractive opportunity with a target therapeutic class that has really unique, promising activity, novel mechanism of action, strong potential efficacy signals from clinical research that dates back over 60 years. It's a long history of being well tolerated, and it bridges the really two core components of treating mental health and addiction in psychotherapy and pharmacology. This is not simply an SSRI where you take it every day, but it really bridges both of these areas and has significant implications in terms of how we manage disease more generally. But how we approach this opportunity is by driving through standard drug development paradigms, by building this neuroscience pharma powerhouse that is going to one day compete with our peers who are also innovating in this space, and likes of the jazzes and sages of the world who have had such a splash in various conditions over the past 5 to 10 years. This is such a unique opportunity, and really an opportunity to change the world and change how we handle and treat mental health more generally. And ultimately, at the end of the day, as I said, there are patients that underline all of these statistics and all of this opportunity. And really improving mental health outcomes is the ultimate goal. How we get to the point where we have a complete sea change in terms of how the well-being of patients with mental health, with addiction, and other neuroscience conditions. That said, we think about the entire life cycle. We use the phrase discover, develop, deploy. And we really think about discovering novel molecules, about novel delivery of existing molecules, and about creating entirely using the classic psychedelics in the most efficient way possible to bring them forward towards a regulatory approval. Our focus is around four main therapeutic areas: psychiatry, addiction, pain, and neurology. And we have interesting collaborations in some of these areas and programs that we are driving ourselves into phase 2 development in the coming months. To use the terminology for convenience, we think the classic psychedelics is the molecules that many people know and have heard of. The MDMAs, LSD, psilocybin. These are molecules that are well characterized, have been used extensively, and offer that most direct path in terms of bringing them forward through development program. We also think of second generation psychedelics as novel delivery or incremental improvements on those classic psychedelics that offer some treatment benefit, whether it's a different treatment regimen or a different mode of administration. But then there's the third generation, the NCEs, and we have a molecule called 18MC that is a derivative of a classic psychedelic called ibogaine. It is a molecule that we are developing, just finishing up a phase 1 study that mitigates the main side effects of ibogaine, which are being cardiotoxic and having hallucinogenic effects. 18MC doesn't have that same safety profile. It has an improved safety profile that mitigates those, but in preclinical models, it maintains the same level of efficacy to treat opioid withdrawal and self-administration of a number of substances, which we think offers a really unique opportunity to bring this drug, an innovative new drug based on classic psychedelics, a psychedelic-inspired therapy, into the clinic and into patients with opioid use disorder and opioid withdrawal. Common question that always comes up is intellectual property. LSD, psilocybin, these molecules have been known for a long time. But there is a really unique opportunity to improve on the classic psychedelics. This is not simply taking drugs that have just been there, but we've been able to apply modern pharmaceutical development technologies, modern pharmaceutical science, and create innovations because of that. We also work in an area where there's been a long history of these compounds being used a certain way that may overlook other innovative and IP generating applications or dosage forms or synthetic pathways. And that's something that we ultimately seek to capitalize on and to bring forward into our novel products. In terms of background, there's been a number of papers and studies in recent years looking at why do psychedelics work. What we do know is that psychedelics are agonists at serotonin 2A receptors, and the psychedelic activity is pretty much wholly dependent on having serotonin 2A engagement. That leads to changes in global brain connectivity, regions of the brain that talk to one another that don't normally do that. It changes in entropic brain activity and increased single neuron excitability. All of this translates into a individual's experience while being treated with a psychedelic. But we don't fully understand the mechanisms of how that carries over into clinical benefit of actually treating a disease or treating a mental health condition. There have been also a number of studies that have been assessing a number of psychedelic molecules. One of our lead programs is LSD. There have been over 1,000 patients treated with LSD in clinical trials to date. There are dozens of clinical trials that are published in the literature on LSD, and 12 of them just since 2008. There's evidence in anxiety, depression, pain, alcohol use disorder, and both the pharmacology and the pharmacokinetics of LSD are really well characterized, which gives us so much information to take forward into the clinic ourselves. And so we're approaching the launch of a phase 2 clinical trial of LSD in generalized anxiety disorder. We also have recent evidence and historical evidence that LSD has analgesic effects, and this includes in experimental models at sub-hallucinogenic doses, but also in diseases like cancer pain, where we saw back in the 1950s and 60s some remarkable responses to LSD therapy in patients with cancer pain. I mentioned 18MC before, an entirely novel mechanism of action that is non-hallucinogenic and non-cardiotoxic compared to ibogaine, uh, but has this same strong preclinical evidence that we can reduce self-administration in animal models of substance abuse. And we were just wrapping up a phase 1 study and getting close to a phase 2 launch in that indication. Recently launched program is our MDMA, the R enantiomer of MDMA. And so, for those of many of you who will know, molecules can come in different handedness. We think of it. So, like your right hand and left hand can't be superimposed, but are mirror images of one another. That's the case for MDMA. When you hear MDMA, it's made up of an R enantiomer and an S enantiomer. What we know from preclinical research is that the R enantiomer maintains some of the pro-social effects of MDMA. We see also that it reduces the stimulant effects that are associated with the S enantiomer. And so, by taking all of this data in conjunction with human clinical data, in which patients with autism spectrum disorder dosed with MDMA observed about 50% reductions in social anxiety, we see an incredible opportunity to utilize the enantiomer of MDMA, the R enantiomer, that we believe has a better drug profile to be used in this population, and are getting underway with a program to do just that, to investigate R-MDMA in autism spectrum disorder as a long-term treatment for one of the core symptoms in a condition, in a disorder that has no approved therapies for the core symptoms. Really a disease, a disorder that we see an enormous market opportunity, but more importantly, an enormous opportunity to help patients and improve social functioning in that population. Digging down into our drug pipeline, again, talked about a number of these studies. We also have an incredible collaboration with a group in Switzerland at the University Hospital Basel, and Dr. Matthias Liechti, who's been doing research on psychedelics for well over a decade. Through that collaboration, we've licensed a large body of historical data on MDMA, on LSD, on other molecules. We're also able to efficiently test new molecules and new applications or new indications of molecules like LSD that we are working on, which gives us a really efficient proving ground to assess where we take subsequent molecules or subsequent indications in our own development programs. We're getting very close in the coming months, by the end of the year even, of launching LSD in adult ADHD in a clinical trial that will go on for 6 weeks to assess the impact on ADHD symptoms, on LSD and generalized anxiety disorder, as I mentioned, which is a dose response study of 200 patients here in the US, and are also approaching the launch of a phase 2 trial of 18MC and opioid withdrawal. And I'm going to jump ahead here to make sure I hit on all the areas of where we work. The other thing that we think is really essential to how we actually get the psychedelics out into the world is the use of digital medicine. And earlier this year, we acquired a company called Health Mode, and Health Mode has a well-developed digital health platform that we've been able to purpose for the delivery of psychedelics. And we think about the entire patient cycle and developing a platform that could ultimately facilitate the infrastructure, uptake, and delivery of psychedelics if and when one day we get them approved. And that can look like in-session monitoring of the patient to make sure that we can reduce the number of human healthcare practitioner hours per unit of patient improvement, but also pre-dose patient engagement and education, longitudinal patient engagement, and overall modeling of the therapeutic process and patient flow throughout psychedelic treatment sessions, so we can get better diagnostics, better patient engagement, and ultimately, hopefully, more precise psychiatric model for engaging these patients and making sure that we are maintaining them and giving them the treatments that they need over time. And I think with that, although we could go on much longer, I can save a few minutes here for questions. So I'll stop there, and thanks everyone again for being here and listening.
Awesome stuff, Rob. I just wanted to ask a quick question. So, like, I forget what slide it was, maybe slide 20 or 17, but it was the slide with the pipeline. So, I mean, each of those little boxes in the image was a candidate, effectively, right?
So each of these is a clinical trial or candidate program that we are
Yeah,
working
go
on.
go back
So
to
if
that
we
if you
jump
don't
jump
mind.
forward here,
Yeah,
yeah. So when you look at the breadth of trials that we generate, and it's important to make a distinction. Not all of these trials are trials that we are the sponsor of. So there's a distinction
sure.
between investigator-initiated studies and commercially sponsored studies. Uh, all of the studies where you see a UHB logo are studies that we've done through our collaboration with UHB. They're investigator-initiated studies, but they're incredibly valuable to inform our decision making and produce really important evidence about the activity of these molecules. So when you look in this space, when you look at the psychedelic sector more broadly, we have an unmatched pipeline of trials, of historical
Mhm.
data, of current data. We could jump forward even through this partnership. We've been able to acquire on the right side here a huge body of evidence, both on MDMA, on LSD, and on the intersection of many of these molecules and their pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So in this sector, we have an unmatched database of this information, unmatched experience and expertise in our extended team, and really find a lot of value in enabling us to accelerate and be more efficient with our development programs because of this long history of research.
Rob, the response in the chat while you were presenting, I'm not sure if you happen to be watching, but the response in the chat was awesome. The community here is absolutely behind you guys. I saw a hand clap emoji a few times. I saw the prayers emoji.
Great.
I saw an amen. I saw an applause. I love what MindMed is doing. MindMed could change the world. And we are here. You're here. Our community is here to talk about investment opportunities. But I want to thank you for keeping it real here and bringing us back to something that is extremely important for everybody. It's improving mental health and helping people with mental health problems. And I'm extremely excited to see what MindMed can continue doing moving forward.
Thanks so much. No, we're really excited and we agree. Our mission is to change the world, to change the world of treating brain health disorders. So many years ahead, and we look to delivering on that potential.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Rob Barrow. He is CEO at MindMed. It's ticker MNMD on the NASDAQ. Have a great rest of your day, sir.
You too. Thanks so much.